Children? This is drug money, lady. Civil asset forfeiture. I'm seizing the cash and the car. It's department property now.
The Georgia sun hung like a heavy brass coin over Highway 16, baking the asphalt until the horizon blurred into a shimmering haze. On this lonely stretch of road, two worlds collided. Sergeant Rick Miller sat in his air-conditioned Interceptor, a predator in mirrored shades, backed by the full, unchecked weight of the county's legal system. Standing on the scorched shoulder was Hattie Vance, 74 years old, her skin the color of deep mahogany and her Sunday best pressed to a razor's edge. To Miller, she was a vulnerable target in a fading dress. To anyone who truly looked, she was a monument of quiet, unyielding power. "I said hands on the trunk, Grandma. Don't make me tell you again," Miller shouted, his voice cutting through the heavy southern humidity like a whip. Hattie didn't scramble. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace, placing her gloved hands on the warm metal of her 1998 Lincoln Town Car. The car was a masterpiece of maintenance, its black paint reflecting the world like a dark mirror, the last tangible piece of her late husband she had left. Miller stepped into her personal space, his boots crunching gravel. He ignored her registration and went straight for the leather bag on the front seat. He flipped it open, revealing the thick, rubber-banded stacks of cash, $15,000 destined for the St. Jude's orphanage. "Officer, that money is a sacred trust from my congregation," Hattie said, her voice low and steady, a calm contrast to his jagged aggression. "The children need that roof before the storm season." Miller let out a short, jagged laugh, fanning a stack of 20s in front of her face. "Children? This is drug money, lady. Civil asset forfeiture. I'm seizing the cash in the car. It's department property now." Hattie straightened her back, her eyes meeting his with a chilling lack of fear. "You are stealing from the fatherless, Sergeant. That is a heavy burden for a soul to carry." Miller sneered, stepping so close his badge pressed against her shoulder. "Soul? I'm a rising star in this state, and you're just a ghost in a junker. By the time I'm sheriff, you'll be nothing but a closed file in a basement, and I'll be the one who cleaned up these streets. You've got no witnesses, no video, and no prayer. In this town, my word is the only gospel that matters." He didn't notice how Hattie's gaze drifted to the dash cam of his cruiser, nor did he see the way she mentally noted the missing serial number on his badge. She remained silent as the tow truck's hook clanked against the Lincoln's frame, a sound like a bone snapping. Miller saw a broken old woman standing in the dirt. He didn't realize he had just intercepted a woman who had spent 4 decades as the iron gavel of the appellate court. A woman who knew the law better than he knew his own name. Sergeant Rick Miller didn't look like a thug. He didn't scream, and he didn't need to use his baton to exert force. He moved with a terrifying, calculated professionalism, the kind that came from years of knowing exactly how much a person could be squeezed before they broke. He adjusted his tactical vest, his movements economical and cold, as he stared at the stacks of cash inside the Lincoln. To Miller, the law wasn't a shield for the innocent. It was a scalpel used to harvest resources. He looked at the $15,000 not as a donation, but as a down payment on his next promotion. "Let's be realistic, ma'am," Miller said, his voice as smooth as Riverstone. "A woman of your demographic driving an older vehicle with this much liquidity? It's a textbook profile. My report will list this as suspected proceeds from a criminal enterprise. It's all very standard." Hattie stood by the roadside, the heat radiating off the pavement in waves. "There is nothing standard about theft, Sergeant. I have the ledger from the church. I have the withdrawal slips. If you take that money, you are taking the safety of 32 orphans." Miller didn't even blink. He pulled out a specialized form, the Civil Asset Forfeiture Waiver. He leaned against the hood of her car, tapping his pen against the paper with a rhythmic, mocking click. "You keep talking about the church, but here's the thing. Georgia law doesn't care about your Sunday school stories. It cares about evidence. And right now, this cash is the only evidence I see. He looked at the worn Bible sitting on the dashboard, then back at Hattie with a thin, condescending smile. Chua kongkan tien mat bazaa. God doesn't need cash, lady. He has the streets of gold, right? But Grady County? We have a budget deficit. I'm sure the Almighty will understand why I'm prioritizing the local police fund over a leaky roof. The insult hit harder than a physical blow. Hattie's hand tightened into a fist at her side, her knuckles turning a ghostly white. The Lincoln was more than a car. It was the seat where her husband had sat for 20 years, the leather still holding the faint scent of his cologne. When the tow truck driver began to crank the winch, the metal groaned in protest. "That vehicle is my husband's legacy," Hattie whispered, her voice trembling not with fear, but with a burgeoning, righteous fury. Miller checked his watch, completely bored by her grief. "Your husband is gone, ma'am, and soon, so is this car. You can walk, or you can ride in the back of my cruiser. Either way, you're leaving here with nothing. That's the beauty of the system. I don't have to prove you're a criminal to treat you like one." He tossed her the keys to nothing, watching them fall into the Georgia dust. He saw a defeated woman. He failed to notice that while his eyes were on the money, Hattie's eyes were memorizing every detail of his face, filing it away with the cold precision of a judge preparing a life sentence. The dust from the tow truck's departure hung in the air like a suffocating veil, coating Hattie's lungs. She stood perfectly still as the taillights of her Lincoln disappeared over the rise, leaving her in a silence so profound it felt violent. Highway 16 was a ribbon of isolation, flanked by endless rows of loblolly pines that offered no shade. To the passing drivers, she was just a small, dark speck against the blinding glare, a hitchhiker or a broken-down soul who didn't merit a second glance. The heat was an atmospheric weight, pressing down on her shoulders. Her heart began to skip, a familiar, erratic rhythm that signaled her blood pressure was climbing. She reached for her handbag, then stopped. Miller had taken that too. Along with the money in the car, he had taken her heart medication, tucked away in a silver pillbox in the side pocket. She felt the sting of tears, but she refused to let them fall. In her 40 years in the belly of the legal beast, she had seen men weep, scream, and beg for mercy. She had learned early on that tears were a currency that bought you nothing in a system built on iron and ink. "Stay focused, Evelyn," she told herself, using the name she had reserved for the courtroom. "Assess the damage, identify the breach." She closed her eyes, visualizing the Georgia Code sections Miller had just weaponized. She had spent decades refining those very laws, ensuring they were sharp enough to catch the wolves without harming the sheep. To see a man use his badge as a skeleton key to steal from the vulnerable didn't just hurt her, it offended her entire existence. She thought of the orphanage, the children who would shiver when the autumn rains came because a man in a polyester uniform wanted to pad a department ledger. The isolation was tactical. Miller had left her there to break her spirit, to make her feel as small as the dirt beneath her sensible shoes. He wanted her to realize that in this county, she was invisible. He saw a woman whose time had passed, a relic of a generation that took abuse with a bowed head. He was wrong. Hattie Vance didn't bow. She began to walk, her heels clicking rhythmically on the breakdown lane. Each step was a deliberate act of defiance. She wasn't just walking toward the nearest town. She was walking toward a reckoning. She had presided over cases that shook the foundations of the state, and she knew one thing for certain. The higher a man climbs on a ladder of lies, the harder he hits the ground when the truth pulls it out from under him. The sun was brutal, but the fire starting to burn in Hattie's chest was hotter. She didn't need a car to find justice. She just needed a phone. The back of the squad car was a cage of hard plastic and the smell of industrial disinfectant. There were no door handles on the inside, no way to roll down the windows to let in a breath of air that didn't taste like captivity. Hattie sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, watching the back of Sergeant Miller's head through the heavy plexiglass partition. Miller drove with one hand, his posture relaxed, even jaunty. He hummed a tuneless melody, occasionally clicking his tongue as he checked his mirrors. He wasn't acting like a man who had just committed a highway robbery. He was acting like a man who had successfully finished a day's grocery shopping. "Don't look so sour, ma'am," Miller said, his voice echoing through the small speaker in the partition. "It's all about procedure. You weren't using that money for anything the state deems essential. By the time the paperwork clears, that cash will be helping us buy new thermal imaging gear. You should be proud. You're contributing to public safety." Hattie looked out the window as the familiar landmarks of her county blurred past. The Baptist church, the hardware store, the diner where she'd had breakfast for 40 years. "Procedure is the shadow where men like you hide their sins, Sergeant. You aren't interested in public safety. You're interested in a windfall." Miller chuckled, a dry, hollow sound. "Call it what you want. The beauty of civil asset forfeiture is that I don't need a conviction. I don't even need a charge. I just need probable cause that the property was involved in a crime. And since the property can't testify in court, it's a very smooth process. It's a closed loop, Hattie. The system is designed to feed itself." That was the moment the chill in Hattie's bones turned to ice. She realized this wasn't a bad apple situation. This wasn't one rogue officer having a lapse in judgment. This was a streamlined, legalized shakedown. The county didn't just tolerate Miller, they relied on him. The judges, the prosecutors, the sheriff, they were all shareholders in this enterprise. Every cent stolen from a person like her kept their lights on and their pockets lined. She leaned her head against the cool glass of the partition. She thought of the law books she had spent her life studying, the Constitution she had sworn to uphold. It felt like a house she had built with her own hands, only to find the foundation was made of sand and the rafters were infested with rot. "You think because you have a badge and a procedure manual, you're untouchable," Hattie said softly, her voice carrying a weight that finally made Miller's eyes flick to the rearview mirror. "I don't think it, ma'am. I know it. In 30 minutes, you'll be processed. Your belongings will be property of the state, and you'll just be another complaint that gets filed in the trash. That's the law." Hattie closed her eyes. "No," she thought. "That is the bureaucracy. I am the law." The Grady County Intake Center smelled of floor wax and desperation. The air conditioning was cranked so low that Hattie's breath came out in faint, ghostly wisps. It was a sensory tactic she knew well, the cold soak, designed to make the elderly and the weary compliant. Miller led her to a concrete room with a single metal bench bolted to the floor. He dropped her leather handbag onto a stainless steel table with a heavy thud. With the indifference of a butcher, he began to empty its contents. He set aside her keys, her church hymnal, and finally, the small silver pillbox. "I need those," Hattie said, her voice sounding thin in the sterile room. "That's nitroglycerin. For my heart, the stress of today, I can feel the tightness." Miller picked up the silver box, turning it over in his fingers like a curious coin. "This isn't in an orange pharmacy bottle, ma'am. No label, no prescription. For all I know, these are illegal narcotics. I'll have to send them to the lab for testing. Standard protocol." "You know exactly what they are," Hattie replied, her hand reaching instinctively for her chest. The cold was beginning to seep into her joints, making her fingers stiff. "If I have an episode in here, that protocol becomes a liability." Miller didn't look up. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table toward her. It was a voluntary relinquishment form. The language was a masterpiece of predatory legalese. Phrases like waiving further interest and indemnifying the department were buried in fine print designed to confuse the exhausted. "Here's the deal, Hattie," Miller said, leaning over the table, his shadow stretching across the document. "You sign this, and I'll see about getting you a ride to the bus station. I'll even expedite the testing on your little white pills, so you can have them back before you leave. You don't sign? You stay here for 48 hours pending a formal investigation into the $15,000. And in 48 hours without your meds, well, that's a long time for an old heart. It was a shakedown masquerading as a choice. He was offering her life back in exchange for the orphan's future. The cruelty of it was surgical. He wasn't just stealing her car and her money, he was trying to force her to be an accomplice in her own victimization. This document is a violation of the Fifth Amendment, Hattie whispered, her eyes scanning the lines with a speed Miller didn't anticipate. You're asking me to sign away my right to due process under duress. Miller laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that echoed off the cinder block walls. You sound like a jailhouse lawyer, but out here, in the real world, this paper is your get-out-of-jail-free card. Sign it or stay in the cold. It's your funeral. He walked out, the heavy steel door slamming shut with a finality that vibrated in Hattie's marrow. He left the lights on, blinding, flickering fluorescent tubes that hummed like a hornet's nest. Hattie sat alone, the cold air biting at her skin, clutching the edge of the metal bench as her heart began to skip a beat, then two. She looked at the paper, then at the camera in the corner. She wasn't just a Goa foo anymore. She was a prisoner of a system she had helped build. The door swung open 10 minutes later. Miller walked in carrying a steaming paper cup of coffee, the aroma of roasted beans a cruel contrast to the sterile, chilled air of the cell. He didn't offer any to Hattie. Instead, he set it on the table, right next to the unsigned relinquishment form, and pulled up a chair. He sat backward, his arms draped over the backrest, looking like a man settling in for a friendly chat. You know, Hattie, I've been thinking, Miller began, his tone pivoting to a faux sympathetic drawl. An educator, a churchgoer like you, you've got a lot of life left. A nice house, friends, a seat in the front pew. Why throw all that away over a hunk of metal and some paper? It's just property. Things can be replaced. But time? Once you're in the system, time is the one thing you never get back. Hattie looked at him, her face a mask of weary composure. You call it property, Sergeant. I call it a life's work. My husband spent 30 years in the sun to pay for that car. That money was gathered nickel by nickel from people who skip meals to help those children. You aren't asking me to sign away property. You're asking me to validate a lie. Miller sighed, a long, theatrical sound of disappointment. He leaned in closer, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Let's be blunt. You're a black woman in a county that doesn't favor your kind when it comes to legal disputes. You hire a lawyer, he'll take half that money just to file the motion. You go to a judge, it'll be one of my golf buddies. By the time this hits a courtroom in 2 years, the money will be gone and you'll be even older, even more tired. Why not just walk out that door right now? One signature and you're free. No charges, no record, just a ride home. It was the ultimate bait, the promise of peace in exchange for justice. He was betting on her exhaustion, her age, and her fear. He saw a woman who would surely choose the warmth of her bed over the cold reality of a fight she couldn't win. Hattie leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his with a sudden, searing intensity that made Miller's smirk falter. You think you're offering me freedom, but you're actually offering me a cage. If I sign that, I am telling every child in that orphanage that the law is a bully's tool. I am telling my husband's memory that his sweat was worthless. She pushed the paper back toward him with one finger. The movement was slow, deliberate, and final. I have spent my life standing in places far more intimidating than this room, Sergeant. I have faced men who thought they were kings because they held a gavel or a gun. And every single one of them learned the same lesson. The law isn't what you say it is. It's what is right. I will not sign. Not today. Not ever. Miller's face hardened, the mask of the friendly officer slipping to reveal the jagged resentment beneath. He snatched the paper and stood up, his chair screeching against the concrete. Fine, have it your way, Hattie. Hope you like the cold, because by the time I'm done with the paperwork, you're going to wish you just stayed on that highway. He slammed the door, the lock clicking into place like a guillotine blade. Hattie sat back, her heart thumping dangerously against her ribs, but her mind was as clear as a bell. The trap was set, but Miller didn't realize he was the one inside it. Through the thick, reinforced glass of the observation window, Miller sat at a cluttered desk, his feet propped up on a stack of files. He was leisurely unboxing a glazed donut, the sugary scent somehow finding its way through the ventilation and mocking Hattie's hunger. Above his head, a television mounted to the wall blared a local news segment about rising crime rates, the volume pushed to a jarring, distorted level. It was a wall of sound, designed to drown out any pleas for help coming from the cells. Hattie felt the first real wave of panic clawing at her throat. It wasn't the fear of a criminal. It was the physiological betrayal of a body under extreme stress. Her chest felt as though a heavy iron band was being tightened with every tick of the wall clock. Her breath came in shallow, jagged sips. "Sergeant," she called out, her voice barely a rasp against the roar of the TV. "Please, I can't breathe." Miller didn't look up. He took a slow, deliberate bite of the donut, his eyes fixed on the television screen. He reached over and turned the knob, increasing the volume until the anchor's voice boomed through the hallway. He was making it clear. In this space, she didn't exist. She was a non-person, a ghost in a concrete box. A young officer, Officer Davis, walked into the intake area, her boots clicking tentatively on the linoleum. She clutched a clipboard to her chest, her eyes darting from the monitor, which showed Hattie slumped against the cell wall, to Miller's indifferent back. "Sergeant Miller?" Davis asked, her voice tight. "The woman in cell 4, she doesn't look good. Her vitals during intake showed high blood pressure. Maybe we should get her some water or check on her meds?" Miller swallowed his bite and wiped sugar from his thumb. "She's distressed, Davis. It's a performance. They all do it when they realize the money isn't coming back. You've been on the force 6 months. Don't let an old lady play you like a fiddle." "But she's 74, Davis whispered, her gaze lingering on the screen where Hattie's hand was now clutching her chest, her knuckles white. "If something happens to her on our watch, nothing is going to happen except a lot of paperwork if you keep bothering me," Miller snapped, his professional veneer finally cracking to show the bully underneath. "Go back to the front desk and file those reports. I'm handling this. Unless you want to spend your next 3 shifts in the records basement, you'll mind your business." Davis flinched. She looked at the cell door, then back at the veteran sergeant. The silence between them was filled by the manic laughter of a game show contestant on the TV. She saw the injustice. It was as plain as the badge on Miller's chest. But the weight of the system was pushing her down, demanding her silence as the price of her career. Inside the cell, the world was beginning to gray at the edges for Hattie. She sank to the floor, the cold concrete biting into her knees. She closed her eyes and began to pray, not for her life, but for the strength to survive long enough to see the man on the other side of the glass face the law he so casually desecrated. Officer Davis retreated to the front desk, but the clicking of her keyboard felt like a confession. Every time she looked at the monitor, she saw Hattie Vance, a woman who reminded her dangerously of her own grandmother, sliding further down that cold concrete wall. The blue-white tint of the fluorescent lights on the screen made Hattie look like a corpse in waiting. Davis looked at her hands. They were shaking. She had joined the force to be a shield, to be the difference in a town that often felt stagnant. But here, in the belly of the Grady County Sheriff's Department, she felt like nothing more than a witness to a slow-motion execution. She glanced over at Miller. He was leaning back, laughing at something on the television, a smear of jelly on his chin. He was comfortable. he was safe. He had the sheriff's backing and 10 years of seniority that acted like armor. If she stepped over him to help that woman, she wouldn't just be making a report. Cô ấy sẽ đang ném sự nghiệp của mình vào lò lửa. She would be throwing her career into the furnace. Just do your job, Davis, she whispered to herself. She's just a suspect. Miller knows what he's doing. But the lie tasted like ash. She remembered the Academy's lectures on the duty to intervene. They had made it sound so black and white, a heroic moment where you stand up for what's right. They hadn't told her that doing what was right meant becoming an outcast in your own house. She saw the other officers drifting by, eyes carefully averted from cell 4, their silence a collective, suffocating weight. This was how it worked. This was how a system turned rot into a standard operating procedure. A soft, rhythmic thumping started. It was Hattie, her hand weakly striking the metal door. It wasn't a loud bang. It was the sound of a fading heart seeking a pulse. Davis looked at Miller. He didn't even move. He just reached for his coffee, his eyes glued to a commercial for a local car dealership. The cruelty wasn't in his anger, it was in his boredom. He was bored by the suffering of a human being because he had decided, the moment he saw her skin and her bankroll, that she didn't count. Suddenly, Hattie's hand stopped. She slumped entirely, her head lolling against the steel. The silence that followed was louder than the television. Davis felt a jolt of pure, unadulterated terror. She realized that if Hattie died, Miller wouldn't be the only one with blood on his hands. Every person in this building who had looked away would be a silent partner in her death. The indignation she had been suppressing surged up, hot and bitter. She wasn't just watching a crime. She was watching the soul of her profession being stripped and sold for $15,000. She looked at the phone on her desk. She looked at Miller, her heart hammered against her ribs, a mirror of the woman in the cell. She had to choose, her paycheck or her conscience. And as she watched Hattie's chest struggle for one more shallow breath, Davis knew she couldn't live with the silence anymore. The world was shrinking. The four corners of the cell began to bleed into a hazy, charcoal gray as Hattie's vision tunneled. The floor, once a cold enemy, was now the only thing keeping her upright. She slid down the cinder blocks, her Sunday dress bunching at her knees, until she was a small, crumpled figure on the concrete. Every breath felt like swallowing broken glass. Her heart didn't just skip, it stumbled, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. Hattie didn't scream. She didn't have the air for it. Instead, she leaned her forehead against the cool, indifferent steel of the cell door. Lai Chua, she whispered, the words barely a vibration in her throat. Lord, I am not ready to leave the garden yet. She didn't pray for the destruction of Sergeant Miller. She didn't ask for fire to rain down on the precinct or for the walls to crumble like Jericho. In the quietest reaches of her soul, she felt no room for hatred, only a profound, aching sorrow for a man who had traded his humanity for a pile of paper. Please, she throbbed, her eyes fluttering shut. The children, they have so little. Don't let their hope die in this room with me. Give me the strength to be their voice one more time. The noise from the television in the hallway, the mindless cheering of a game show audience, seemed to drift miles away. In the void left behind, Hattie found a strange, terrifying clarity. She thought of her husband, Gabriel Sr., and how he used to tell her that the darkest hour was just a shadow passing over the sun. She felt the weight of the silver pillbox that Miller had taken, envisioning the small white tablets sitting on a desk just 30 feet away while her heart labored to find its rhythm. A single tear escaped, tracing a path through the dust on her cheek. It wasn't a tear of defeat, it was an offering. She was 74 years old, and she had spent her life upholding the scales of justice, believing that the truth was enough to keep a person safe. To die here, in the dark, because of a donut-eating bully's greed, felt like a betrayal of everything she had ever stood for. Just a few more minutes, she breathed, her fingers twitching against the floor. Just enough to finish the work. She felt a sudden, sharp coldness in her extremities. Her chin dropped to her chest. She looked like a woman who had finally given up, a victim of the heat, the stress, and the systemic cruelty that had been designed to crush her. But inside that failing body, the iron gavel was still holding court. She was waiting for her angel, not realizing that her prayer was about to be answered by a woman with a badge and a conscience she could no longer suppress. Officer Davis didn't think, she just moved. She waited for the exact moment the television news transitioned to a loud, bombastic weather segment, and Miller leaned back to adjust his belt. He was distracted, laughing at a joke from a deputy passing by his desk. Davis grabbed a plastic cup, filled it from the cooler with shaking hands, and palmed her personal cell phone into her sleeve. She moved toward the cell block with a feigned air of boredom, her heart drumming a frantic rhythm against her ribs. If she was caught, Miller wouldn't just write her up, he'd crush her. But the image of Hattie Vance slumped on that floor was a stain she knew she'd never be able to wash off. The heavy steel lock clicked open with a muffled thud. Davis slipped inside and pulled the door nearly shut behind her. The air in the cell was even colder than the hallway, smelling of old concrete and fear. "Ma'am," Davis whispered, dropping to her knees beside Hattie. "Ma'am, drink this." Slowly, Hattie's eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. She took a sip of the water, the cool liquid reviving her just enough to hold her head up. She looked at the young officer, seeing the terror etched into the girl's features. "You're risking everything," Hattie rasped, her voice a ghost of its former strength. "I can't let this happen," Davis said, her voice trembling. She pulled the phone from her sleeve, the screen's glow blinding in the dim cell. "I can't get your meds without Miller seeing, and I can't let you out. But I can give you 1 minute. One call. If I hear him coming, I have to take it back. Do you understand?" Hattie nodded, her fingers trembling as she reached for the device. She didn't dial 911. She didn't call a local lawyer. She punched in a 10-digit number with the muscle memory of a woman who had memorized it the day it was assigned to a high-security desk in Washington, D.C. The line rang once, twice. Then, a deep, resonant voice answered, filtered through the professional calm of a federal office. "Vanfong Zamdok Gabriel Vance, Signier. Office of Director Gabriel Vance, how may I direct your call?" "It's me," Hattie Tetau, her voice cracking. "Gabriel, I'm at the Grady County Jail. They took the Lincoln. They took the money for the children. And Gabriel, they took my heart medicine. I can't breathe, son." On the other end of the line, the silence was absolute for exactly 2 seconds, a silence more terrifying than any scream. "Mom?" Gabriel's voice was suddenly stripped of its professional veneer, replaced by a cold, vibrating intensity. "Stay on the line. Give the phone to whoever helped you." Hattie handed the phone to Davis. The young officer's hand shook so violently, she almost dropped it. "Hello?" Davis breathed. "Officer, listen to me very carefully," the voice on the other end said, and Davis felt the hair on her arm stand up. "I am Gabriel Vance, director of the FBI. You are the only thing keeping my mother alive right now. I am tracking this signal. If she so much as faints before I get there, I will hold every person in that building accountable for first-degree murder. You keep her conscious. You keep her safe. 30 minutes. Do you understand?" Davis looked at Hattie, then at the door where Miller sat oblivious. I understand, sir." 30 minutes, the director repeated. "The storm is coming." The silence in the cell was heavy, broken only by the tinny, distant roar of the television in the hallway. Officer Davis held the phone to her ear like it was a live grenade. On the other end of the line, 3,000 miles away, the atmosphere had shifted from a bustling government office to a command center of terrifying precision. Gabriel Vance did not scream. He did not threaten to burn the town down. His voice was a low, melodic baritone, the kind of voice that had dismantled cartels and unseated corrupt governors. It was the sound of absolute institutional power. "Officer," Gabriel said, his tone as flat and cold as a sheet of ice, "I need you to identify yourself for the record. Name and badge number." "Davis, sir. Sarah Davis. Badge 422, she stammered, her eyes darting to the heavy steel door. "Officer Davis, you are now the primary federal witness in an ongoing civil rights investigation. You have 30 minutes to ensure Judge Evelyn Vance, my mother, remains stable. If Sergeant Miller or any other officer attempts to enter that cell to interfere with her or that device, you are to inform them that they are obstructing a federal investigation under Title 18, Section 1503. Do you understand your orders?" Davis swallowed hard. The word judge rang in her ears like a bell. She looked down at Hattie, the woman she had thought was just a grandmother from the wrong side of the tracks, and saw the iron gavel flickering in those tired eyes. I understand, sir, but Sergeant Miller, he's the shift lead. He'll notice I'm off my post." "Let him notice," Gabriel replied. The sound of rapid typing and low-voiced commands echoed in the background of his office. "As of this moment, Sergeant Miller's authority has been vacated by federal mandate. I am currently authorizing an emergency medical and tactical response. If he touches that door, tell him he isn't just fighting a lady on the highway anymore. He's fighting the Department of Justice." Hattie reached out, her fingers brushing Davis's wrist. She looked at the phone, a faint, weary smile touching her lips. "Gabriel," she whispered, "the money, the orphan's money." "I have the ledger, Mom." Gabriel's voice softened for a fraction of a second, the only hint of the sun beneath the director. "I have the tow truck's GPS coordinates. Everything they took, they will pay back 1,000-fold. Just breathe. Keep your eyes on Officer Davis. I'm coming to get you." The call didn't end with a goodbye. It ended with the sharp, crisp click of a man who had already moved on to the next phase of a tactical strike. Davis stared at the darkened screen of her phone. She felt a strange, cold calm wash over her. The fear of losing her job was gone, replaced by the realization that she was currently the only line of defense for a titan of the American legal system. Outside in the bullpens, Miller laughed at another joke, oblivious. He thought he was the king of a small hill. He didn't realize that the mountain was already falling on him. The heavy iron bolt of the cell door groaned as it was thrown back. Sergeant Miller stepped into the cramped space, the scent of his third cup of coffee and stale sugar preceding him like a warning. He looked down at Hattie, who was still slumped on the floor, her back against the concrete. To him, she looked defeated, a broken remnant of a woman who had finally realized the weight of the boot on her neck. "Time's up, Hattie," Miller said, his voice dripping with a casual, cruel boredom. He held out a fresh copy of the relinquishment form and a cheap plastic pen. "The tow yard just called. They're about to start the inventory process on that Lincoln. If you want to see any of your husband's trinkets again, the photos, the spare tire, the memories, you'll sign this now. Otherwise, the car goes to the auction block and you go to the county farm." Officer Davis stood in the corner, her body rigid, her hand clutching the hidden phone in her pocket. Her face was ashen. Miller flicked a glance at her, his eyes narrowing. "Davis, why the hell are you still in here? I told you to get to the front desk. Get out. Now." "Sergeant, she needs her medication," Davis said, her voice shaking but holding its ground. "Her heart." "I don't remember asking for a medical opinion from a rookie," Miller snapped. He turned back to Hattie, looming over her, his shadow swallowing her whole. "Sign the paper, old lady. This is your last exit. Don't be a martyr for $15,000 that nobody's ever going to see again. In 5 minutes, I'm filing this as an abandoned asset. You'll have nothing. No car, no money, and no heartbeat if you keep pushing your luck." Hattie looked up at him. The glassiness in her eyes had been replaced by a terrifying, crystalline focus. She didn't reach for the pen. Instead, she folded her hands. "You should have checked the registration more carefully, Sergeant. You should have checked the name on the title." Miller laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "I don't care if the Pope's name is on it. In this county, I am—" The air in the station was suddenly punctured by a sound. Not a siren, but a synchronized digital chorus. Miller's personal cell phone began to vibrate violently against his hip. Simultaneously, the desk phone in the hallway erupted in a sharp, insistent ring. Then another, and another. The sound was relentless, a frantic electronic alarm that cut through the blare of the television. Miller frowned, his hand moving to his belt. "Who the hell is calling this late?" He pulled out his phone. The caller ID didn't show a number. It showed 3 letters that made the color drain from his face instantly. D-O-J. In the hallway, a deputy shouted, "Sergeant, the sheriff is on line 1. He sounds like he's having a heart attack. He says there are black SUVs crossing the county line at 80 miles an hour." The pen in Miller's hand remained extended, but his fingers were trembling. He looked back at Hattie, who hadn't moved. She looked at him with the calm, pitying gaze of a judge who had already passed the sentence. "It's too late, Rick," she said softly. "The record is closed." The arrival was not marked by the chaotic screech of tires or the cinematic roar of a SWAT breach. Instead, it was characterized by a terrifying, surgical silence. Through the front windows of the Grady County Sheriff's Department, the dusty twilight was suddenly eclipsed by a phalanx of identical black SUVs. They moved in a synchronized formation, gliding into the gravel lot with the grace of predators. There were no sirens, only the low, rhythmic thrum of high-displacement engines and the crunch of heavy tires on stone. Inside the station, the air seemed to vanish. Deputy Miller stood frozen in the cell doorway, his hands still gripping the useless relinquishment form. He watched through the plexiglass as a dozen men and women in windbreakers, emblazoned with Federal Marshal and FBI, stepped out of the vehicles. They didn't run, they marched. They carried the heavy, undeniable weight of the United States government. A man in a charcoal suit led the procession. Gabriel Vance stepped through the front doors, his presence instantly shrinking the room. He didn't look like a grieving son, he looked like a reckoning. 2 tactical medics followed him, their trauma bags slung over their shoulders with professional urgency. "Where is she?" Gabriel asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a frequency that made the glass on the trophy cases vibrate. The sheriff, a man who usually carried himself with the swagger of a local king, stumbled out of his office, his face the color of old parchment. "Now, Director Vance, there's clearly been a misunderstanding regarding a routine traffic stop." Gabriel didn't even look at him. He moved past the sheriff as if the man were made of smoke. "I am not here for a conversation, Sheriff. I am here to execute a federal warrant for the immediate release of a United States appellate judge and the seizure of all evidence pertaining to a violation of Title 18, Section 242. The federal agents fanned out with practiced efficiency. One stood by the server rack, another at the weapons locker, and 4 more blocked the exits. It was a total, bloodless occupation. They didn't draw their sidearms. They simply placed their hands on their belts, their eyes scanning the room with a cold, analytical detachment that made the local deputies feel like amateurs in their own house. Gabriel reached the cell block. He saw Miller standing over his mother. For a split second, the professional mask slipped, and a flicker of raw, protective lightning flashed in Gabriel's eyes. "Step away from the prisoner, Sergeant," a federal marshal commanded, his voice as flat as a dial tone. Miller's hand went instinctively toward his service weapon. In less than a second, 4 red laser dots appeared on his chest, steady and unblinking. The iron gavel sat on the floor, her eyes meeting her son's. She didn't cry. She didn't move. She simply waited for the system she had served for 40 years to do what it was designed to do: crush the lawless. The heavy steel door of the cell didn't just open. It was held wide by 2 federal marshals who stood like pillars of granite. Gabriel Vance stepped into the cramped, light-starved box. For a man who managed the nation's most complex investigations, his world had narrowed down to the 5-foot radius surrounding the woman on the floor. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He knelt in the gray dust of the cell, his expensive suit trousers pressing into the grime without a second thought. "Mom," he whispered. Hattie looked up. Her skin was pale, a thin sheen of cold sweat matting her hair at the temples, but her eyes were clear. She reached out a trembling hand, and Gabriel caught it in both of his. His hands were large, warm, and steady, the hands of a son who had been raised to be a protector. He didn't ask if she was okay. He could see the toll the last 4 hours had taken. He simply leaned forward and pressed his forehead against hers for a fleeting, private second. "I have your medicine," he said softly. One of the tactical medics knelt beside them, efficiently popping a nitroglycerin tablet from a fresh bottle. Gabriel held the water cup for her, his arm hooked behind her neck to support her weight. He watched her swallow, his jaw tight enough to crack bone, but his touch remained as gentle as a summer breeze. He didn't look at Miller. He didn't look at the sheriff. To Gabriel, the men who had done this were already ghosts, mere paperwork to be processed later. His focus was entirely on the woman who had taught him that the law was a sacred fire that must never be allowed to go out. Slowly, with a strength that surprised the medics, Hattie gripped Gabriel's forearms. "Help me up, son," she rasped. "A judge does not meet her detractors from the floor." Gabriel stood first, then reached down and hoisted her with a single, fluid motion. He didn't carry her like an invalid. He supported her like a queen. He draped his own charcoal suit jacket over her shoulders to ward off the chill of the cell, the weight of the fabric providing a physical shield against the indignity of the room. As they walked out of the cell, Gabriel kept his arm firmly around her waist, her small frame tucked against his side. Every federal agent in the hallway snapped to attention. It was a silent, powerful salute to the woman who had written the very manuals they used to hunt predators. They passed Sergeant Miller, who was now being held against the wall by 2 marshals, his badge already unpinned and sitting on the floor. Hattie paused for a heartbeat. She didn't say a word. She just looked at him, a long, steady gaze that carried the weight of a 1,000-page verdict. Then leaned against her son, she walked toward the light of the exit, leaving the darkness of Grady County behind. The lobby of the precinct was thick with the scent of ozone and dread. Sergeant Miller stood pinned between 2 federal marshals, his breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. His bravado had evaporated, replaced by a frantic, animal confusion. He watched Gabriel Vance lead the old woman toward the door, his mind still trying to reconcile the grandma he had bullied with the sea of suits now dismantling his life. "You can't do this," Miller yelled, his voice cracking. "It was a legal seizure. She had $15,000 in cash. I followed the code." Gabriel stopped. He didn't turn around immediately. He carefully handed Hattie off to the lead medic, ensuring she was seated on a gurney, before he turned to face Miller. The director's face was a mask of cold, academic curiosity. "You mentioned the code, Sergeant," Gabriel said, stepping into Miller's space. "You mentioned the 1998 Reform Act. You even cited the Civil Asset Forfeiture Amendments, didn't you?" Miller swallowed hard, nodding desperately. "Yes, Section 4. It's all there in the manual." Gabriel reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a small, leather-bound volume, the Federal Handbook on Judicial Precedents. He flipped to a bookmarked page but didn't read from it. He knew the words by heart. "You're right, Miller. It is in the manual, but you missed the signature on the original bill," Gabriel said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly low register. In 1998, the state of Georgia attempted to pass a version of that law that was so predatory, so unconstitutional, that a single senior judge of the appellate court struck it down and rewrote the ethics clause from scratch. She's the reason you have to at least pretend to have probable cause. She's the reason the law hasn't completely swallowed this state whole. Gabriel gestured toward Hattie, who was now being wrapped in a warm blanket. She sat upright, her chin tilted at that unmistakable regal angle, the posture of a woman who had spent 40 years on a bench overlooking the highest courts in the land. "You didn't just arrest a black woman in a junker, Sergeant," Gabriel whispered, the words hitting like a physical blow. "You kidnapped the Honorable Evelyn Hattie Vance, the woman who literally wrote the Anti-Corruption Act you just violated. They call her the Iron Gavel in Washington. Do you know why?" The blood drained from Miller's face until he was the color of chalk. The name finally clicked. He had seen that name on his first day at the academy. It was etched into the case law he was supposed to study. Vance v. State, the precedent that made it a felony for an officer to use forfeiture for personal or departmental gain. "Because," Gabriel continued, leaning in until his lips were inches from Miller's ear, "she doesn't just interpret the law, she is the law. And you just gave her the perfect case to prove why men like you belong in a cage." Miller's knees buckled. The relinquishment form he had tried to force her to sign fluttered to the floor, landing in a puddle of spilled coffee. He looked at Hattie, and for the first time, he didn't see a victim. He saw a monument. He saw the end of his career, his freedom, and his future, all reflected in the steady, unforgiving eyes of the woman he had left to die in the dark. The silence that followed Gabriel's revelation was heavy, a suffocating vacuum that seemed to suck the oxygen right out of the room. The local deputies, who moments ago were leaning against their desks with practiced indifference, now stood as still as statues. They looked at Miller, then at the floor, suddenly fascinated by the scuff marks on the linoleum. The brotherhood that had protected Miller for a decade had dissolved in a heartbeat, replaced by the instinct to survive a federal hurricane. "Sergeant Rick Miller," Gabriel said, his voice echoing in the hallowed silence, "you are under arrest for the violation of civil rights under color of law, kidnapping, and official misconduct." One of the federal marshals stepped forward. He didn't use the standard-issue plastic zip ties. He pulled out a pair of heavy, stainless steel Smith & Wesson cuffs. The sound of the ratchets, click, 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 was the only noise in the station. It was the sound of a closing door. Miller's hands were forced behind his back. He looked at the sheriff, his eyes pleading for a miracle, for a phone call, for a loophole. But the sheriff was staring at a point on the wall 3 feet above Miller's head, his own hands trembling as he realized the federal agents were already seizing his computer towers and filing cabinets. The system Miller thought he owned was now turning its cold, mechanical gears against him. "The badge," Gabriel commanded. The marshal didn't wait for Miller to comply. He reached out and gripped the silver shield pinned to Miller's chest. With a sharp, violent tug, he ripped it from the uniform. The fabric tore, a jagged sound that felt like a scream in the quiet room. The marshal tossed the badge onto the stainless steel booking table, where it landed with a hollow, pathetic clang. It wasn't a symbol of authority anymore. It was evidence. Miller's legs finally gave out. He sank to his knees, not out of prayer, but because the weight of his own hubris had become too heavy to carry. He looked up at the deputies he had joked with over donuts just an hour ago. Not one of them met his gaze. They stood in a circle of silence, a jury of his peers who had already reached a verdict. "Take him out," Gabriel said, turning his back on the man as if he were yesterday's news. As the marshals dragged Miller toward the exit, his boots scuffing against the floor, he passed Hattie on the gurney. She sat perfectly still, her son's jacket draped over her like a robe of office. She didn't look away, and she didn't gloat. She simply watched the man who had stolen her husband's car and her breath be led away in the very chains he had used to threaten her. The front doors of the precinct swung open, and for the first time that night, the flashing lights outside weren't a threat. They were a signal. As Miller was shoved into the back of a black SUV, the same kind of cage he had put Hattie in, the town of Grady County watched in stunned silence. The iron gavel had returned to the bench, and court was finally in session. 3 days later, the Georgia sun had softened, casting a long, amber glow over the driveway of Hattie Vance's home. The air no longer felt like a weight, it felt like a reprieve. A flatbed trailer backed slowly into the cul-de-sac, carrying a cargo that drew the neighbors to their porches. It was the 1998 Lincoln Town Car. Gabriel had seen to it personally. The car didn't just return, it returned resurrected. Every inch of the black paint had been buffed to a liquid shine, the chrome bumpers gleaming like silver sabers. The interior had been detailed, the scent of old leather and Hattie's husband's cologne preserved and amplified. On the passenger seat sat the leather briefcase, its seal intact, containing every single dollar of the $15,000 destined for the orphanage roof. Hattie stood on her porch, her hand resting on the railing. She looked weary, the circles under her eyes a testament to the strain on her heart, but her spirit was clearly mending. Beside her stood Officer Sarah Davis. Davis wasn't in her Grady County uniform. She was dressed in a sharp, dark suit, looking like a woman who had finally found her fit. Following a whirlwind federal inquiry, she had been the first to receive a formal commendation from the Department of Justice for her extraordinary courage under duress. More than that, Gabriel had extended an offer for her to join the Federal Marshal Service training program. She was no longer a witness to evil. She was a participant in its dismantling. "It looks brand new," Davis whispered, watching the Lincoln being lowered onto the pavement. "It's an old soul, Sarah," Hattie replied, her voice regaining its rich, rhythmic resonance. "Sometimes the old things just need a little light to show they still have worth." The local news had been relentless. The sheriff had resigned in disgrace, and 3 other deputies were facing indictments for their roles in the forfeiture scheme. The system that Miller had bragged about was being pulled apart brick by brick, replaced by a federal oversight committee that Hattie herself would advise. Gabriel stepped out from the driver's side of the Lincoln after parking it in its rightful spot. He walked up the stairs, handing his mother the keys. "The engine's tuned, the oil's changed, and there's a new set of tires on her. She's ready for the Sunday run." Hattie took the keys, her fingers closing over the familiar metal. She looked at her son, then at Davis, and finally at the car that represented a lifetime of dignity. The physical restoration was complete, but the air still held the tension of the coming trials. The healing had begun, but Hattie knew that true restoration wasn't just about returning property. It was about returning faith to a community that had been taught to fear the light. She turned to Davis and squeezed the young woman's hand. "You did more than save an old lady, Sarah. You reminded this town that a badge is a heavy thing to carry, and only the strong can keep it from dragging them into the mud." The federal courtroom in Atlanta was a cathedral of mahogany and silence. Rick Miller sat at the defense table, but he looked nothing like the man who had loomed over a Goa Fu on a dusty highway. Stripped of his tactical vest and his sunglasses, he looked small, his cheap suit bunching at the shoulders. He kept his eyes fixed on the floor, avoiding the gallery filled with the orphans of St. Jude's and the congregation of Hattie's church. When Hattie Vance took the stand, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. She didn't need a robe to command the space. She wore the same Sunday dress she had worn the day of her arrest, her pearls glowing against her skin. She looked at Miller, not with the fire of a vengeful enemy, but with the weary clarity of a judge who had seen it all. "Sergeant Miller," she began, her voice steady and resonant, echoing off the high ceilings. "You told me on that highway that you were the law. You told me that my future was a closed file in a basement. You believed that I was old, and because I was a woman of color, my life was an asset to be seized and liquidated." Miller's defense attorney started to object, but Miller touched his arm, stopping him. The former sergeant looked up, and for a fleeting second, the arrogance from the roadside flickered in his eyes. A dying ember of the man he used to be. "I was just doing my job, ma'am," he muttered, the words sounding hollow in the halls of justice. "No," Hattie corrected him, her voice sharpening like a blade. You were using the law as a shield for your own greed. You forgot that a badge is not a crown, it is a promise. It is a promise to protect the fatherless and to honor the dignity of every citizen, regardless of the cash in their pocket or the year of their car. She leaned forward, her gaze pinning him to his seat. You told me that God didn't need cash, Sergeant, and you were right, but you were wrong about the rest. You see, the law isn't found in a forfeiture manual or a budget report. The law is found in the conscience of a community. When you broke that promise, you didn't just steal a car, you stole the people's trust. And that is a debt you can never fully repay. The judge handed down the sentence, 12 years in a federal penitentiary, followed by a lifetime ban from any position of public trust. As the marshals led Miller away, this time in chains he couldn't laugh off, he passed Hattie one last time. He looked broken, a man who had finally realized that the system he thought was a weapon had turned into his cage. Outside the courthouse, the Georgia sun was warm, but it no longer felt like a threat. The new roof on the St. Jude's orphanage was being finished, paid for by the very fund Hattie had defended. Gabriel stood by the Lincoln, holding the door open for his mother. Hattie paused on the top step, looking out over the city. She had spent her life in these halls, but today felt different. Justice hadn't been a lightning bolt. It had been a slow, inevitable tide. She got into the car, her hands finding the familiar rhythm of the steering wheel. She wasn't just a survivor. She was the conscience of the state. As she drove away, the black Lincoln shimmered like a diamond under the wide southern sky, leaving the echoes of the iron gavel behind in a room that would never forget her name.